everything is thrown out the window. Once you're inside, it's an entirely different world. If you don't really adapt to this world and grow to understand it, you will be consumed by it. Prison taught me many valuable things in life. The most invaluable thing that I learned from prison was how precious moments in life are. The life beyond the wall sometimes, sadly, is really irrelevant to the moment at hand. And you have to think like that in order for you to devote your precious time and energy to what it's going to take for you to get through that day. Greetings and salutations, I'm Victor Sorti and welcome to my channel at 28 to Persevere. Thanks for watching. At the end of this video, smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It's all very much appreciated. Today I'm talking about the ebb and flow of everyday life in prison. You go inside, you really don't know from one day to the next what you're going to do, how you're going to respond to things, especially if you're in a young-minded context. You don't really think about the maturation process, the things you're going to have to adapt to and learn from and survive. When you deal with the things you deal with on that type of level, you really learn to be retrospective. You understand the value of your mind and your ability to contemplate, reflect, rationalize, and individualize each and every moment and each and every day and individual you come across. You learn to see things and solo, and you learn to see things conceptually, and you think to yourself, okay, how can I process this and how can I survive? What can I do? How do I react to it? What does it mean to me to survive this moment, and how it's going to reflect back on how I stand and sit each and every day, how I interpret that day. Prison taught me many valuable things in life. The most invaluable thing that I learned from prison was how precious moments in life are. The invaluable time you spend with your family, the individualization you give to your own personal wants and needs, how selfless people can be that care for you, and how selfish you can be when your entire focal point is on your survival. Rightfully so. Sometimes you have to think strictly about yourself. I mean, the life beyond the wall sometimes, sadly, is really irrelevant to the moment at hand. And you have to think like that in order for you to really channel in and devote your precious time and energy to what it's going to take for you to get through that day. On an emotional and mental level and a spiritual level, you're tested. Unbeknown to you at the time when you go inside, the things that you're going to confront are going to question your ethical standards. You're going to deal with dilemmas, and you're going to have to siphon. You're going to have to siphon through this, and you're going to have to find some sense of balance, some sense of relevancy that's going to affect you, but it's also going to educate you and enlighten you. And when you embark on this type of journey, you don't know what the fates have in store for you. You have no idea. When you go inside, one thing you can be assured of is that you will question. You will live a life of questioning everything around you, everything you believed in, everything you gave faith to, your very nature of your faith, your beliefs, your principles, your values, the way you interact with people, your form of civility that you were taught at a young age through learned behavior in the environment you grew up in. Everything is thrown out the window. Once you're inside, it's an entirely different world. And if you don't really adapt to this world and grow to understand it, you will be consumed by it. You will eat or be eaten, and there's no in between. It truly is and isn't this form of living that will define you. You have to find out what it is you need to do and what isn't the right way of holding yourself. And you will be taught invaluable lessons. You'll be taught harsh lessons. You'll be taught brutal lessons. And these lessons are invaluable. Later in life, I understand now, when I interact with the average Joe or Jane and understanding their history or getting to know them and their story, everybody's journey is different. And it's the remarkable concept and idea of living. Once we live our lives, we learn to accept the life we live as part of our own reality. My reality was transformed and altered in a way that I could never imagine. And I understood that in order for me to get through each and every day, I had to learn to adjust to this reality and morph into whatever it was I needed to be at that moment. I tried and I did to a large extent hold on to my humanity, and I'm very proud of that. My ability to maintain my sense of levity, be socially engaging with the individuals around me, learn to understand various people of various cultures and races, and understanding where they came from and what they gave power to. I familiarized myself with many of the shot callers throughout the joint, those that were the heads of various gangs and factions, and I got to know them quite well throughout my years of incarceration. And they grew to respect me, and I grew to respect them, the way they carried themselves and the way I carried myself. So they learned to accept me. A lot of them just called me the Viking. That was the name that I had, basically my moniker for many years. And some of the guys later on just knew me as the Viking. They didn't really even ever call me Vic. The shot callers, they ran the various factions, and it was very sound judgment on my part to get to know them and get to know how they moved, the things they gave power to. And it came in handy many times when we would have sit downs and there was various wars, especially gang wars or racial wars that were on the cusp of breaking out in prison. You would have sit downs, various courts. You would meet up with other gang members and you would sit and many times I was basically a mediator between various gangs. I would sit there on the courts because I knew I was a neutral court. I was not affiliated with any gangs, so they felt comfortable coming to my particular court, though it was predominantly a white court. I also had some Spanish brothers on there, and they knew that I wasn't going to judge whatever it was going down with them, and it was basically like a peace offering. They would come there and they would discuss and basically have a sit down. That happened many times during my time in the Auburn Correctional Facility, Court 16, and the men that were with me, they stood by my side that whole time, and there was very tense moments, and thankfully nothing ever popped off on those courts. And there was various gangs of various sects and factions that would meet up in these courts, and they would discuss various topics of interest and things were about to happen to try to squash certain circumstances. And many times they were squashed. Other times it would escalate after time and pop off. And obviously, being a mediator, I wasn't taking a side one way or another. I was just trying to stay out of it and keep my people out of it, people on my court, with a sense that I wasn't gang related or affiliated, but I still had the core people that I hung around with, and I had their back no matter what. Especially my oldest brothers and various individuals that I was closest to, that I spent numerous times with and grew up with, that to this day are part of my brotherhood. But it was a very interesting time during the early '90s and the early 2000s with the courts, because the courts were a mainstay, and I believe probably still are to a large extent, though the population is drastically different now, and the mentality is also, of course. But what's behind the wall is behind the wall. That world alters very little time. It's still an oppressive, brutal environment to live in and under the thumb of the state. But you learn to understand the various people around you. You learn to adapt in the ebb and flow of life. And even though you learn that you need to question everything around you, you find the answer sometimes of what you're seeking to understand the environment and to survive. Sometimes you have to have those answers. People look up to you for these answers. How do I move? Who do I give power to? I mean, as the years progressed in my incarceration, there were many times that younger men would come inside, especially young white kids that were very vulnerable and afraid, and a lot of guys would direct them towards me when I was in my early 30s and 40s. And a lot of times they would call me old timer all the time because I had so much time in at that point. And I would hook them up with cosmetics, or give them basically like a care bag, make sure they're good, give them literature to read, get them on the courts, get them working out, staying away from the drug game, other gangs, just trying to lead them in the right direction, because I knew that how vulnerable they were. I was in those shoes. I lived that life when I came inside, and there was old timers that helped me out, like the Hells Angels in particular, which I spoke about in my first video. And these men, when they came inside, they were just awestruck. They didn't know if they were coming or going. A lot of these young kids, and some of them would put on the front and strut around and everything, and figure like they knew knew the way around the joint. But you could see in their eyes they were driven by fear and uncertainty, and I understood that. And it's hard to front all the time. You're going to be exposed sooner or later. I never believed in fronting faking it to make it. I believe to understand the environment, I had to become the environment to a large extent, but hold on to who I was, my own individuality, and my sense of self. But as you progress in prison, I remember a lot of times with a lot of the young kids that would come upstate, they would just be lost, man. I mean, you would see some guys fall on the wayside. The kids would get hooked up with gangs and whatnot. And I didn't look out for everybody. Obviously, certain people I would read the room right and stay away from, especially if you had shady cases, sex offenders of that nature. I stayed far away from. I had no interest to know them, and they got basically the just desserts in the joint. But the reality was there were many men, especially the young generation that came up, and a lot of guys were directing towards me, and I had to go speak to Vic and get him on the courts and just try to lead him down a righteous path to a large extent in a corrupted world that we lived in. And I wasn't the bearer of good tidings all the time, obviously, but I also understood that what it would take to lead by example and understanding the influence you had over others by the way you led. So I tried to lead in a way that would inspire and understanding the need for brotherhood, to be gracious and humble when you needed to be, but also to be a hard nature if you had to. If you had to react in a brutal fashion or an authoritative fashion, you would do so to survive and to lead in that way. It's a world unbeknown to most people that have never been inside, but the ones that have, they understand this. They totally can relate to what I'm saying. I'm pretty sure of it. You learn as you get older, especially the longer you do in prison, that you can relate to the next man. You can relate to that world. You see the young guys coming up, and you remember walking in those shoes, with the shaved head and the pressed greens that you had. And my state greens were so faded over time through the years and years and years of having them. And then I see the young kids come in, and they're fresh out of reception and into the max prisons, and just wide eyed, just in shock, and I just what do I do with myself? How do I hold myself? And I always felt that that sense of vulnerability that if you could help them in some form or fashion, definitely reach out and do the right thing. Try to keep them away, but it is what it is in prison. I mean, when it's all said and done, you have to stand on your own 2 feet. You have to man up and put on your big boy pants, do what you got to do when it's time to do it. And you'll be tested. You'll be forced to make a decision on how you respond to circumstances around you. And as far as using your intellect, to me, that's the major factor. I truly believe, if you just contemplate and reflect and rationalize and understand what it is that you're up against and how the next person thinks, understanding human nature as I learned to do and through study and trials and tribulations. I really believe that if you really understand it, you can move in a way that can be very proactive and productive for you, and even proactive and productive for others. So I always try to carry myself in that fashion. Maintain what faith you have while confronting the hardships of everyday life in prison. It's a true test of a measure of a man. It's what they give power to. It's what they believe in. That is at its core who you are. In prison, your sense of self, everything you believe in, everything that you had faith in, is questioned. And you have to really come to a conclusion how you're going to move, how you're going to view things you give power to, what you're truly believing in. How is it truly working for you? And only you know this. And I believe that we're all driven by a power within us, an energy of sorts. I'm a firm believer in the blood of my ancestors that courses through me, has a certain power within it that inspires me, guides me spiritually each and every day. And each and every day, I thank the gods for that power to understand the world around me the best I can and to move in such a fashion that will help me survive and learn, being a student of life, educate myself in a fashion that will inspire perhaps others. I know that life in prison is not for the weak of heart. Your heart will be hardened over time, and you have to hold on to what faith you have so that you never lose your sense of self. Keep inspiring, keep living, because this is the only life we live. Each and every moment is so precious. That being said, Victor DeSorti, thanks for watching my channel at 28 to Persevere. Hit me up with a comment, press that like button, and share this video. Until next time, go with the gods, persevere.